Hey guys, welcome back to Release the Craftin. Bristle here with another installment of Storycraft. I am so excited for episode 2, you guys, because what an incredible roller coaster this one was on. I'll start out by saying right off the top, the story that we are doing today is The Wild Swans, which I had to come to via reverse engineering because I couldn't remember the name of the story. Just like these snapshots, these like vivid snippets of memory from my childhood of an animated movie I watched like on repeat, um, which I realized as I was thinking about it isn't actually a movie in the sense that I own it and I could play it over and over again. It was like something that came on TV and I would just watch it every single time it came on. And that just led me down this weird rabbit hole where I'm trying to recall this memory. And all I could remember was there's a princess, there are swans, it was animated, and I can like vividly imagine, like I could picture the scenes from the movie, but I couldn't remember like the premise or anything else about it because that's how long ago it was. So I just typed in some keywords into YouTube and found the entire movie, which I of course watched before doing this. And I was so excited because here's some things I didn't know. One, this movie came out in 1994. It's like a 30-minute made for TV type of deal. I really don't know all the history of it because I didn't go look into the history of it. All I remember is that I watched it on TV over and over and over again. And the best part about this, you guys, is that it's narrated by Sigourney Weaver. Like, the icon herself narrates this movie that stuck like in my brain as if it's like what's it called, one of those memories that like a formative memory. Like this movie is part of my like subconscious character development and I couldn't remember it, but it features the voice of literal screen goddess Sigourney Weaver, so that makes it even better and more special to me than it was before. And now that I've watched it all again, I got the same wave of nostalgia and it's still held up. So if you are interested in seeing the entire movie, it is available for free on YouTube. We're gonna jump into it. Insert mandatory disclaimer, don't come at me. I'm going to make it into like a title card thing, but insert it right here. And let's begin. So the story is The Wild Swans. It is by Hans Christian Andersen. And it begins, once upon a time, in a faraway land, there was a king who seemingly had everything except for the one thing he wanted most, which was his wife, because she was dead. Because it's a fairy tale, so of course the mother is dead. But he had, a kingdom, a beautiful castle, all the stuff he needed in the world. Also, he had an indeterminate amount of sons, because depending on which version of this tale that you get, it's like 5 sons, 6 sons, 7 sons, 11 sons. There's sons. The king had a surplus of boy children, and one very precious little girl named Elise. I'm going to call her Elise. I don't even know. I didn't even go look to see like what she's actually called in the actual Hans Christian version. I didn't even go back to read that because I was just like, I watched my movie and was like, I know all I need to know, say less. I have heard a couple different versions of the story. I did look into that, but I didn't go back to read the original to see. So we're doing this. It's my own thing. Back to the story. So he has his one daughter, Elise. That's his favorite child. But the king is out. He's wandering these woods. He's mourning the loss of his wife. The man is grieving. We have some sympathy. We have a lot of sympathy. It's really sad. And in the forest, he runs into this like old house. And as he's approaching this house, inside of the house is a witch, like a sorceress type witch, not just a regular run-of-the-mill witch, but a sorceress who can see him coming, and she's like a ragged old crone woman, and she sees the king coming, and she sees opportunity. So she uses her magic to transform herself into a beautiful young maiden, and she emerges from this house as the king is approaching, and she sees that he's in such a state, and she tells him, My king, why are you so sorrowful? Allow me to wipe away your tears. And the king is so awestruck by her beauty that he forgets entirely that he was just mourning the loss of his wife, who birthed him infinity children because surplus of boy children. Um, he just forgets all about her, throws that entire idea of mourning the loss of his beloved out of the window because he is so enchanted by the beauty of our sorceress that he takes her back to his castle and they are wed the same day. If anyone ever says that you're moving too fast in a relationship, you're not moving that fast. Don't let them tell you that, because the king marries her the same day. And when the our sorceress gets into this castle, she's married, she's got it on lock, right? She then proceeds to continue to enchant the king so that he only has eyes for her. Meanwhile, she's looking around this gang of children and she's like, God, I hate kids. I hate kids so much. I don't want to raise somebody else's little weasels. How can I get rid of them? So she gets into the king's ear and she starts telling the king, these children, they're wild, they're unruly, they're disrespectful, they're poorly mannered, like they are the worst children I have ever seen. Something needs to be done. And the king's like, yeah, I can only see that face. Everything else you're saying about my beloved deceased wife's children, meaningless. Whatever you want, whatever you need, because I only have eyes for you. And over time, she starts to develop a particular hatred towards Elise. And I'm going to go with the fact that she, being the evil sorceress type, can see that Elise is exceptionally pure of heart. Not to say that all these other children aren't also pure of heart. I'm going to say that they're all kind of pure-hearted children. But Elise is just super special. Like Disney princess, like special. Animals follow her where she goes. Sunshines, daisies, rainbows, unicorns. This is Elise. And that just really like chafes at the sorceress. Like this girl in particular really bugs the life out of her. And more than anything, she wants to get rid of this little girl. But she can't figure out how to do it. And suddenly it dawns on her that since she is in the king's ear, she can get his blessing to get rid of Elise by sort of shipping her off to a boarding school. Let's say that's the reason that she tells the king, like, Elise is the best mannered of them all since she is your favorite, but she's still an unruly wild child. I'm going to have her go over here so she can be better educated. And the king's like, sounds great, do that. And she's like, great. And the king's like, just keep letting me look at your beautiful face. And she's like, not a problem. But first, let me get rid of this kid. So she goes and she sells Elise to this peasant couple. And I guess somewhere in the contract it's stipulated that they have to bring her back eventually at some point. That doesn't actually come up in this story as far as I understand, but you'll see why that's essential later on. So they sell Elise off, and as they are taking Elise away, her brothers kind of like see what's happening. They catch wind of what's going on, and they're like, what? You can't just take our sister and like sell her off to some peasants. She's a princess. Our dad will object to this. And she's like, actually, he won't. And you guys aren't going to tell him because I'm going to change you guys all into horrible, ugly birds that will repulse the king immediately. And he'll probably have you killed. So she uses her magic. She transforms all the boys into birds. And her goal is to make them like hideous, ugly birds that nobody likes. In her brain, she's thinking something that's like going to be an ill omen and no one wants around. So she's trying to turn them into ravens. But these kids are also pure-hearted. So they turn into swans, which arguably, from where I'm standing, are worse birds than almost half of the bird kingdom because swans are kind of jerks. But for the sake of the story, Hans thought that they were better than ravens, so they're swans. I would have gone ravens. Swans is the choice. So she turns them all into swans and tells them that they will never find peace during the day. They have to be swans all day, and they can only come down in the night, which means that they will be able to turn back into their regular forms in the evening. I don't know why that's a stipulation. You think it would be 24/7, but she puts that in there because they can't tell their father the truth at night, I guess. I don't know. They all fly away because they're birds now and they have bird brains, I guess. And they take off. Meanwhile, poor Elise is like stuck on this farm. She's stuck there for years. Years. Um, where she learns how to like live on a farm and do all the things that peasants have to do, including like spinning and weaving and taking care of animals and sewing and just regular survival like shit because these peasants weren't evil. They just raised her as their child, but for money. There never like a point in the story where it says that they were particularly mean or rude to her. So it seems like she had a pretty decent life considering she had just been sold into like indentured daughtertude. Because that was the deal that they made. I don't know. She's living her best farm life as best as she can be, although she's sad that she's away from her brothers and her father, and she misses, her old life that she used to have. And then, I guess because it's like a contract that they're like obligated to fulfill, they return her when she's of a marriageable age, I guess, 15. Gross. In my story, she's now aged up to 18 because icky. Um, but they bring her back to the castle. The queen sees that she has grown into a even more beautiful, more like supreme, perfect being in the time that she's been away. And she tries to like beguile her. She offers her, like a chance to come in the castle. She's like, we're gonna take you to see your father. Everything's gonna be wonderful. But first, why don't you come over here? Let me bathe you, clean you up so that you're presentable for him because you can't see your father dressed like a peasant. Clearly, he's not gonna know like what to do with you if you look like you're poor. And so she takes her to like the baths and then tries to curse her beauty away by making her like ugly by filling the bathtub full of toads that she tells to like go at her and make her look like you. And I remember this scene, I think more than anything, more than the Swans in the original animation, which like when I watched it again, you guys, as an aside, I know this is like a total derailment of the story, but as an aside, I thought this scene lasted a lot longer than it did. Somehow time has dilated in my child's brain to adult brain because I thought this scene of the toads like cursing her in the bathtub was half the movie. It was literally like 2 seconds. The toads get in the water, they approach her. She's so pure, innocent, and beautiful that they turn into peonies, and she just continues on with her bath. And then the queen gets so angry, back to the story, that she just trashes her dress. Like, think ugly stepsisters and Cinderella vibes when they just tear apart her dress. Like, that's what the queen does. She rips apart her dress, she messes up her hair, and she rubs mud all on her face. And then she takes her to the king, who is like, who's this? I can't recognize her at all. Who is this thing? And the queen's like, oh, this is your daughter. She's claiming to be your daughter. This poor is claiming to be your daughter. This little wretched street rat says that she's your daughter. She's clearly not because look at how horrible and hideous she is. And the king's like, you're right, because my daughter is beautiful and perfect in every way. I miss her deeply. This is a great offense. Get this horrible street poor out of my sight. And the queen has her like chased out of the castle. And she wanders around the village a little bit trying to ask people like, have you seen my brothers? I'm actually the princess. The people don't recognize her. They don't know where her brothers are. They tell her that her brothers have been dead as long as the princess has. Like, they are dead or missing because they haven't returned and nobody knows what happened to them, but nobody recognizes her. So they don't like help her in any way. They just kind of go like, no, you little filthy kid, get away from me. I don't know who your brothers are because it's not the princess. You're not a princess because you have mud on your face. And there's like part of me that wants to be like, Elise, could you have just asked for like a rag, like a washcloth or something in front of your father to be like, hey, can I just get a washcloth real quick so I can like wipe my face off and you can see what this lady did to me? But no, she never asks once to like wash her face so that her dad will recognize her. Because mud makes you unrecognizable and ugly if you're a lady. And apparently it's impossible to get off. So she leaves her, like, village, her country, And she continues to look for her brothers without success. She wanders into a forest and just kind of falls asleep in the first place she like crashes at. No shelter. She just lays down and falls asleep in the forest. And she has this dream, which is a story spoiling prophecy. So I'm not getting into it. It doesn't matter what she dreamed because it doesn't really impact her actions so much as it just ruins the story. So we're skipping ahead. The next day, she finally takes a freaking bath and washes her face. Which, like, if it was me, I would wash my face immediately as soon as mud was on my face. Maybe brush my hair a little bit because this lady like natted it all up. But Elise is built different. And she continues to wander the countryside. She runs into an old woman who tells her that she hasn't seen the brothers like the lost princes, but she did see like a gaggle of beautiful swans down by this stream. So Elise is like, cool. I'm gonna follow this stream, see if I can see these swans. And maybe that'll give me some more hints because it's the only thing I have to go off of. And she gets to the stream where the like swans were last seen, and she continues to follow it down all the way to the sea. By the time she gets to the sea, she hasn't found anything. She hasn't had any luck. So she vows that she will not stop her search until she finds her brothers, which thankfully for her isn't very long because she literally sees some swans flying over the horizon as the sun is setting. And turns out, lo and behold, it's her brothers. They're all there. Sun sets, they turn back into men. She sees that they have also grown as well as her. And she's just so excited to be rejoiced. Like, she's rejoicing to be back with them. And they tell her what happened, how the queen put a spell on them that turns them into swans, how they have been staying in a land across the sea that they can't really get to in a day. And this really confused me, because they turn into swans at night or in the day and then turn back into men at night. So I'm like, well, if you can't get there within a day, then how did you get across the sea? We're not going to answer that question. We're not even going to pay attention to that question. We're going to scoot right on past it. And they decide, hey, we're going to take you back to our home across the sea. But how can we do that? Like, if you will trust us to carry you, how do we do it? And they come up with the idea to weave a bunch of rushes into a net so they can carry her across the sea. But as they're flying across the sea the next day, there is like a storm, and the storm whips up, plus the weight of Elise. Like, she's so heavy, clearly, because she's a full-grown person, and they're just birds now. It starts to slow them down even more than they anticipated. So it becomes very clear that they are not going to make it across the sea even a little bit in the day that they have before they turn back into men. So as they are like rapidly descending to Earth or the ocean as the sun starts to set on that day, Elise spots a rock in the sea, and she's like, there's some land. And her and her brothers all managed to just land there in the nick of time. So there's like a little rock with like a colony of boy children and one girl child who are all now grown adults. And they huddle together on the rock overnight through the storm. Nobody falls off the rock. Nobody falls asleep or anything crazy happens. They survive through the night. They start again the next day, and turns out land wasn't actually that far away. They probably could have made it in a day, but Elise is super heavy, so they couldn't make it. But they make it to the land, and they take her to the cave that they've all been staying in, because swans notoriously stay in caves, or a gaggle of boy children all stay in caves. They live in a cave, and when they're there, they tell her, like, you can rest, you won't have to go through your struggles anymore, we'll take care of you here. And so that's how they live for a little bit. So during the day, they fly away, they do swan stuff and swan business, and then they come back, and she stays in this cave, and she just does Elise business. And one night, she has this dream, and in the dream, an old woman tells her that she can cure her brothers, but she's gonna have to suffer for it. And we'll get to, at the end of the story, why I think this is, like, problematic. But for now, she has to suffer to cure her brothers. And the only way she can do this cure is by picking up stinging nettles only on this mountain, this particular mountain that they are currently staying in with the cave. And it grows all over the mountain, but it also grows in graveyards. And so that's the only place that she can go to find these nettles. And she has to weave them into a thread and then, or spin them into a thread. Sorry, Cindy. She has to spin them into a thread and then weave them into shirts. And when she makes the nettle shirts, she has to put them over her brothers, and they will turn back into humans like full time. But once she starts doing the task, she can't speak to her brothers because if she opens her mouth to say any words, it'll be like she's stabbing her brothers to the heart with a sword. And, she wakes up in the next morning and just like starts immediately. Like she like just F's off, goes up the mountain, starts picking these nettles and gets to work, which to me, the phrasing of like, once you start the task, you can't speak until you're done would tell me that I could just tell my brothers like what's going on and then stop talking and then start the task. But Elise didn't do that. She skipped that step and she went straight to the tasks. She can't tell them what's going on. They can't figure out why their sister isn't talking to them. And she's gathering up all these nettles. She's like, damn, my fingers really hurt, but she's not telling anybody. They're stinging her. They're burning her. She's getting sores and blisters and like open wounds from these nettles, from handling them so much. And her brothers can see what she's doing. They can see that she's hurting herself, but they don't know why. And then, as they watch her work, they kind of puzzle out like, oh, she's doing something with a purpose. I think she's trying to help us. And one of her brothers is so moved that he takes her hands with all the blisters on it and he cries, and his tears make the pain in her hands go away for the night. So she works round the clock the first day, and by the morning she has one shirt made. So 24 hours of work, she makes one shirt. After that day, her brothers fly off, do swan business, and she is like set upon by these hunters, and one of these hunters is particularly good looking. Turns out he's the king of this land, and when he walks up to her, he starts commenting on how beautiful she is, how lovely she is. She doesn't answer him back, and he realizes that she can't speak, so he's like, oh, she's beautiful and she's mute. Perfect. He decides that because she's clearly super, super beautiful and super pure looking, that she must be a princess. She's obviously a princess because no uggos are princesses. Only pretty people are princesses in this universe. And he's like, okay, this beautiful mute princess, why are you in this cave? I don't get it. You don't belong out here. You're a princess. Come back to my castle with me. So he abducts Elise. Just takes her away from her home because she can't speak and she has no paper, so she has no agency, which is exactly what he's looking for in a wife. He takes her home, and when they get back to the castle, he gets her cleaned up. He sets her up with a nice room, gives her all these beautiful dresses and lavish jewelry. They doll her up so she looks like a proper princess, right? He shows her off to court. Everyone's like amazed by her beauty. She's so radiant that like it seems like a light is shining from within her. She is like the paragon of virtue and purity because she's just so like magnificent. She's the most beautiful woman in the world, clearly. And everyone's just taken with her. Everyone, but one of the advisors to the king, who's like, I don't trust that girl. She doesn't speak, you say? Something is wrong with her. Which, to me, in this context, since he's like in the king's ears, whispering over here like, oh, that girl, there's something wrong. She's up to no good. Clearly this girl's a mess. And he has no context or evidence for this outside of the fact that he's like, I hate pretty people. I think he might just have something for the king. That's my theory, and I'm going to stick with that theory because it makes the most sense to me. And you'll see where it goes. So the king's like, she's perfect. I don't even know what's wrong with you. You're silly. I will believe no negative things about this woman. She is the light of my world. She's everything. And he is so obsessed with her that he's like, I need to marry this woman. How can I do it? So he starts showing her around his castle. Like, here's my crib. This is my room. I have 11 million of them. Like, look how wealthy I am. Here's all my fine things. Here's my room with just fancy coats. Over here is a pile of I don't know, fancy gold pants and, like just really showing off his stuff. And she's like not impressed. And he takes it to be like, oh, she's miserable, which low key she is. She really misses her brothers. She's not like super enthralled with this wealthy lifestyle. She wants to get back to the work of curing her brothers. And she's afraid because she's, in this castle where she's been abducted by this king. And she's worried that her brothers won't be able to find her because it's not like she left them a note. He just took her. He took her from the cave and left no indication of like where he was heading. So they're going to get back at that night and then realize that she's gone and not know where she went. So she's like super depressed. And the king's like, man, I've shown her my coats, my pants, my fancy Lego toys, and she's just not digging it. What can I do? So he gets this bright idea to build her a room that looks exactly like the cave that she left, with all the things that were in the cave, including the nettles and the shirts. And he's like, what about this room, my sweet? And she finally smiles because she's excited to get back to saving her brothers. And she's like, well, they might not know where I am, but at least I can continue working. And the king's like, got her. She fucking loves me because bitches love cave and cave decorations. So he proposes and she's like, no. She shakes her head no. And he's like, well, shoot. Well, I clearly understand that no means no. So he proceeds to ask her every single day afterwards, because if she says no once, eventually you can wear her down, is clearly the logic he's using here. So he continues to ask her, and she continues to just work away at weaving and knitting her nettles into shirts and doing all the fiber art things that I can't really explain. Sorry, Cindy, I should have maybe done some research. But eventually she runs out of nettles, and she's like, well, this is inconvenient because now I'm in this castle. So in the dead of night, she sneaks out of the castle, and she realizes that she can't get back up to the mountainside where, she had been getting her nettles from before. So she has to, like, finally admit that she has no other alternative but to go to the graveyards. So she goes to the graveyard, she starts picking the nettles, and as she's walking around, they're sprouting up around her because this is magic, and the magic is trying to help her get the task done. So while she's there, guess who just happens to be lurking in the graveyard at night, guys? It is the king's advisor, who's like, aha, I got her. She's in a graveyard, and everyone knows only witches hang out in graveyards. Not me. I'm not a witch. There is absolutely no reason for me to be here, but I'm here watching this girl pick some plants in a graveyard. Evil. So he tells the king the next day, like, you will never guess what I saw. She was up there and she was in a graveyard. That girl that you brought here is a witch. Only witches go to graveyards at night. And the king's like, well, why were you there? And he's like, that's not important. It's not important, my guy. What's important? She's a witch. And the king, for the first time, is like, that is suspicious. I thought only ugly people went to graveyards, and this girl is so pretty. Why else would she go except for the fact that she might be a witch? So they put her on trial, and they find her guilty of being a witch because anyone who's ever done history even a little bit knows that it takes zero evidence to convict a woman of witchcraft. So they convict her of witchcraft, they lock her up in a tower to await her execution, and they throw all the shirts that she had and all the nettles that she picked into there because they're like, this is bad juju, we don't know what to do with it, but we don't want to be responsible for getting rid of it, so here's all your magical shit back, you awful witch. Which is, it's logic. And, she's not upset. Like, she's a little bit bummed, but not super upset by this because all it means is that she can finally have time without the king constantly asking her to marry him to work on these shirts and actually finish them. And while she's in this tower, she finishes the shirt. She uses up all the nettles she can gather. She notices that one of the shirts doesn't have a sleeve, and she's like, well, this will have to do because I don't have any nettles and I'm trapped in this tower, so I can't go get more. Hopefully this is enough. And on the day of her execution, they gather her, they let her pick up all of the shirts and take them with her, because again, they don't want to touch the magic thing, and they don't see the logic in separating a witch from her magic things. And they parade her through the town as they do, and people are like, burn her, burn the witch. And she's just like, oh man, I don't know what I'm going to do because all I have are these shirts and no other course of action. And so they're about to tie her to like a pyre so they can burn her. And she looks up in the sky and she's blinded by this like white brilliance. And it turns out to be the feathers of her swan brothers as they are descending down. They found her. In fact, they've been looking for her nonstop, tirelessly since she disappeared from the cave. And they swoop down, attack. They attack. They're attack swans now. They attack the executioner. And as they're flying around, she starts to throw her nettle shirts over on top of the her brothers on top of the swans, and they start changing back into young men. And she manages to throw every single shirt she made, because remember, this is infinity indeterminate amount of brothers, so she's made like infinity indeterminate amount of shirts, and she throws them over the top of all of her brothers, and they all turn back into the handsome young princes that they are, except for the youngest one, who does turn back into a man, but because he got the shirt without a sleeve on it, one of his arms will forever be a bird wing, which sucks, but I'd still hit it, so we're good. I don't think it's that much of a deterrent. Better a bird wing than like a whole bird body. So now with like the curse reversed and her brothers are back in their bodies, she's like, oh, thank God I can finally speak again. At which point everyone's like, oh, the mute lady spoke. And they all quiet down enough for her to tell them the entire story. And while she's telling the story, the king arrives and he's like really moved by this whole tale, realizes he had the entirety of the wrong idea. The advisor, who was like whispering in his ear, like, F's off to another land, because he's like, whoop, my time's up, gonna get out of here before they start pointing fingers at me. And everyone is so moved by her story that they start to cry. And the king comes up to her and he starts to beg her for forgiveness. And he's like, can you ever forgive me? I'm so sorry for doubting you. Our love should have held strong. And she's like, I do forgive you. And they get married and they live happily ever after. Nobody asks any questions about what happens to her brothers after that point. I'm just stuck with the fact that she married her gaslighter abductor, which is not great. But yeah, that's the end of the story. That's the end of the Wild Swans. And I have a couple of thoughts on this story and a couple of interesting facts, I guess. The first being that Hans Christian Andersen really has a problem with women who speak. As evidenced by this story and The Little Mermaid, he's just like, shut up, women. But he also paints women in a way where the only way that they can have any virtue is by being beautiful and silent, which is pretty common for the time. It's not great. It's not great. Like, it's supposed to show her humility and her like willingness to go through these trials, like her piety almost, to suffer in this way, silently, in order to reverse this curse. Like, her suffering is going to be greater magic than this curse. I don't think that's a great idea. It really just doesn't sit well with me. If I were to reimagine the story, I probably would tell it in a way where like, maybe she doesn't have to suffer so much. Maybe she can just make them the magical shirts with the magical herbs and just not suffer. Like, her not speaking is fine, but the fact that it robs her of all of her agency to the point where this like king just shows up, abducts her, and is like, now marry me. And then at the end they still end up married, and nobody's like, didn't you just steal that girl? Did you even ask her if she wanted to go with you? Like, that question never comes up. It's not great. It's not great. In fact, if I was going to write this story myself or rewrite this story, I might have her go through all of that, save her brothers, and then when the king comes to beg her for forgiveness, her just be like, absolutely no, you're obnoxious, I hate you, but also my father is under the spell of a sorceress, and I need to go save him next. So then she and her brothers all venture back, across the sea via boat, and they retake her kingdom, they kill the sorceress, and the father is finally released from the spell. He's like, man, my daughter is the best, the most proactive of my children, who were just swans for this entire time and didn't really contribute outside of the fact that they helped, my daughter move from one place to another. And I'm going to give her the kingdom. And she becomes the queen. And everyone's like, that's wonderful. It's perfect. She's a queen guarded by her 11 million brothers. And that's my happily ever after, the end. I will say I did learn an interesting fact about why the sorceress may have saw her as competition, and that has to do with the fact that they used to, in some places, give the right of succession, like the person who could inherit the throne or the property, to the girl child, because you can control who the girl child marries, therefore controlling the path of like succession and where that money goes and stuff like that. Um, versus the boys, but also because you send all your boy children off to like fight in wars and battles and stuff. So they might not come back. And if, the person who's supposed to inherit all of your land and property is gone and then they die, that's not great because you need a successor. But your daughter's not going to war, so you can keep her there and, have control over where your money goes, which makes more sense to me. So I'm thinking that's probably more of a better reason why the sorceress was like, I gotta get rid of this girl child, especially because, she could have cursed them all, but she chose to curse just the brothers and then sell the daughter. I also probably think because they bill her, Elise, as being so pure and wonderful, that probably the reason she couldn't curse her was because she was the purest of them all. So that's why she chose to not curse her, but send her away instead. But yeah, I think she wanted to get rid of Elise because Elise would inherit all the wealth, even if, she got rid of all the boys, there was still this girl in her way. Um, and if she married her off, she would take that inheritance with her. So the best course of action was to try to get rid of her, and cast her out of the kingdom because she couldn't curse her. So that's just my thoughts. I really love this story, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this telling. Again, these run so long, I really need to work on this format, but I kind of like the stream of consciousness storytelling. It's almost the same as the way that I speak when I am doing videos, just like regular crafting videos, because everything I do there is stream of consciousness. So you're still getting unfiltered, one take Priscilla in this, and I really like that aspect. I just need to learn how to like whittle these down a little bit or break them up into parts. Maybe I'll break this up into 2 parts because it is very long. I don't know. You'll know by the time you're watching this. But yeah, that is the story of the Wild Swans. It was an adventure. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. And if you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate your face. And until next time, bye!